Seek is the self-hosted search, analysis, and alerting server built for structured log data. You can track errors, build dashboards, and configure alerts without sending any data outside your own infrastructure. Try Seek for free on Windows Server or Docker at datalust.co/seq. That's datalust.co/seq. Hi, I'm Scott Hanselman. This is another episode of Hansel Minutes. Today I'm chatting with David Scott Bernstein. He's the author of Beyond Legacy Code. He's an agile software developer. He's the passionate programmer online, and he also runs a company called To Be Agile. How are you, sir?
I'm very well, thank you. It's so great to be here.
Yeah, it's great to chat with you. You, like me, have been around a long time. I think I probably learned about you the first time when I read Beyond Legacy Code, a book that you did under the Pragmatic Programmers label, the book publishing label. I assume you think of yourself as being a pragmatic programmer as well.
A pragmatic and passionate programmer, yes. I think we need those two elements.
Yeah. What do you say when people online though say like, oh, I'm not that passionate. I just want to get paid. Like there's value in that as well. Like does passion required, or can one always find their passion?
I don't think it's necessarily required in order to do a job, but I think it is required, or certainly enhances like the joy of doing it, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I agree that if you can find the passion in whatever you're doing, you're going to have more fun. But a lot of developers I'm seeing, especially 10, 20 years in, are looking at their jobs and they see a lot of toil. They see a lot of grunt work. I've used the term yak shaving. It's just like, I gotta
Yes.
shave this yak. It's not fun. And I know that recently you have been getting deeper into AI and written a book called Prompt Engineering for Everyone. Are you finding that AI is decreasing toil and increasing the passion for you?
Yes, most definitely. Most definitely. As a developer and coding, but mostly for me right now in areas around non-coding, like, the writing and communicating and marketing and, all the other things that happen when you kind of run a one-man business.
So do you think about it as an assistant?
Yes. I think of it as a human. I think maybe one of the best pieces of advice I can give you is treat it like a person rather than a thing. And not so much people joke around and say, oh, that's because when the AI overlords come, they'll maybe spare us. Of course, people are joking around, but I think that it really is to our own personal benefit, because I read something many, many years ago that there's different parts of your brain that process information about living things versus non-living things. So when we put it in the category of a living thing, it helps us be more creative with it. And at least that's my experience.
That is interesting because I have heard both sides. I have heard people say very explicitly, don't anthropomorphize the thing. Don't put googly eyes on it and pretend that, Siri is your friend. It's commander data without the feelings. But the thing is, we do put faces on it and we have given it a voice and it does talk like it is our friend. So I can see arguments both ways.
I love the word that you used, anthropomorphize, because I think that, yes, in science and animal behavior, which is another thing that I had passion for in my life, it's not a good thing to try to imbue human qualities to non-humans. But I think as software developers, one of the key skills that we need is to be able to visualize. And that's what I do. I visualize like little people running around inside my computer. Now, I know that's not true, but it does help me sort of deepen my visualizations and understand more deeply.
That's very interesting. My relationship with AIs, or and I'm conflating both ChatGPT that we'll talk about, but also your Siris and your Alexas and your different kind of agents. My relationship with them is very different than my non-technical wife. While she has an MBA, she is consistently disappointed with computers and what's going on underneath, and the little people inside are not doing what she needs them to do, while I'm always thinking about the bits and the bytes and what's actually behind it. So I have a little trouble thinking about a large language model other than just a bunch of numbers that represent the statistics of the most likely thing that someone would say.
Yeah. So in my mind, and this is still very formative in my mind, but I kind of feel like there's two worlds that we perceive. The logical, analytical, deterministic side, and then there's a more creative visualization, pattern-oriented side. And both are available to us because our brains can perceive both. But sometimes they're unified and sometimes they're in conflict. And I can see this throughout science. I can see this throughout the way we build software. And we've, in the last couple hundred years, really focused on that sort of logical, analytical side and developed science. And the metaphor I use for that is like the steam engine, because a lot of things that were driving science was all about how to be more efficient in closed energy systems. But now physicists are, going into quantum theory, and many physicists have this notion of the holographic universe where everything is interconnected. And that's more pattern-oriented kind of thinking. And we're all aware of like procedural programs that are more the logical side. I think that AI models, and some of the other tools are really kind of our first steps into a more holistic kind of programming. It's clearly a different kind of coding. And it creates this new world for us. I'm very excited about ChatGPT because I think it's not just a better search engine. There's access to information that was never available to us in terms of how information is integrated. And I've had the most amazing conversations with ChatGPT that are generative. I've like given it multiple research papers and said, how do we synthesize these ideas to come up with a new theory? And Chat can help me with these things, which blows me away.
Now, when we say ChatGPT, which is becoming, in my opinion, the kind of the proper noun that is becoming a noun, like it's the Kleenex for a generic tissue, or if I joke about Googling with Bing, where Google has become a verb, but you can Google with DuckDuckGo if you feel like it. Are you referring specifically to ChatGPT from OpenAI and ChatGPT-4, or a particular language models, or generative large language models as a class?
In that last conversation, I was speaking in terms of generative in general, backpropagation, and some of the algorithms that are generally used that are published that I can read about. But my personal experience right now is pretty much focused on ChatGPT. I have not played with some of the new other tools, which I will be doing very soon.
Now, do you do your work, and did you do the work where ChatGPT was kind of almost your co-author on your book, Prompt Engineering for Everyone, that we're going to talk about? Did you do that work in the developer playground, or did you do it in the consumer front end of the OpenAI ChatGPT?
I did it in the consumer front end, and I did it with the first draft with the free version of ChatGPT, and all versions that I used were only 3.5. So this whole book, the first edition of the book, was just version 3.5. And that, I think, is significant because it's a very limited model. We had to write one page at a time. I couldn't go and deal with the whole book or even chapters at a time. So using GPT-4, now that I'm more experienced with it, I would write very differently. And I don't plan on co-writing. And I've shared authorship of this book with ChatGPT because it truly was a collaboration. But I've been building other ways of writing with ChatGPT, not as a co-author, but more as an editor. And I'm finding that incredibly helpful as well.
Wow. Yeah. Because 3.5, I think, has 175 billion parameters, and GPT-4 is, 6 months newer. It's got a lot more nuance. It's quite a bit bigger. The fact that you were able to use the more limited 3.5 to accomplish, this book. And did you think about it as a collaborator, as an editor, as a pair, like, two people on one keyboard?
As a co-author. We discussed every point. We went back and forth. I was open to its ideas. And by the way, it was really intent on making this information available to many different kinds of people, making sure that we are aware of the dangers in terms of like it hallucinates sometimes or it has bias. And how do we deal with that? And how do we recognize that? So all those things we both wanted to put into the book. We were actually really very very much in the same mind about what the book should be about. And the prompting techniques that I used and some very advanced techniques I hadn't seen really discussed anywhere else or covered anywhere else.
Interesting. So you did, and you are, and you continue to unapologetically anthropomorphize ChatGPT. Did you, when you go to sleep and you wake up on the next day, there's a little bit of a reset, but you're still the same. You're still the same David Scott Bernstein. But ChatGPT doesn't remember that context. How would you catch it up on the previous work? How would you maintain context? Because it's a new person who's never met you before. Every time you sit down at the keyboard.
Yes, that's true. But and I forget what they call it. But you can give it two pieces of information now when it starts off a session. So at least you can get it familiar with your name and your intent, what you're trying to do. And then I have a series of prompts, and usually my prompts are like a page or more. So I write very detailed prompts about exactly how I want ChatGPT to behave for me. And typically I'll start a session off with, my editor prompt or another kind of prompt, and then we'll work in that context for a while.
Oh, interesting. So you almost have a catch-up prompt, like, welcome to the meeting. In case you aren't familiar with what we're doing here, we're writing a book, and I'm David, and here's the deal. And you basically catch it up every morning with a page-long prompt.
Yes.
Is that something that everyone should be thinking about? Because I gave a talk on AI this morning, and one of the fun little things I like to do in my talk is the first thing out of my mouth is I say, it's a beautiful day, let's go to the, and then I have everyone tell me where they want to go. And 90% of people say beach, but every once in a while someone will say arcade or casino or whatever. And then we use that as a conversation to talk about the context, because everyone's context is different. Just because it's the most likely answer doesn't mean it's the correct one, because we don't see all this hidden context. So it seems like passing context to ChatGPT is super, super important. Otherwise, it's not going to know what you're trying to accomplish.
The way I think of it is that when you do that, when you ask, and one of the ways, as you say, to get ChatGPT within the context is to give it a role. And what we're doing there is we're taking this large language model and focusing it on just some specific kinds of information. And limiting that knowledge really actually helps it give us better answers in depth for the area that we're interested in.
Interesting. Okay. So how much did you tell it about, like, where we are temporally? Like, I assume it knows we're at the end of the 20th century, 21st century rather, or beginning of the 21st century. Now I'm wondering where we are. But, you're telling it like kind of like contemporary, what we're trying to accomplish, but you're also trying to make a book about prompt engineering for everyone, not just for engineers. Like, you didn't write this book for coders. You wrote it for all humans. You're giving it this context?
Yes, I did. And I did that primarily because I felt like I wasn't quite ready and chat wasn't quite ready for a book for developers. Because, like you, I'm a developer. But I feel like we need a little bit more time for it to actually mature in this area. So everybody probably could benefit from using ChatGPT, and that's what the book that I wrote was.
Hey friends, are you dealing with excessive context switching in your daily development tasks? Maybe spending too much time looking for that one code snippet that you lost in the chaos of your development workflow. You're not alone. Even if you do surface that snippet in your Notes app, or you find it in Teams, do you remember the context behind it? Check out Pieces for Developers. We use this to manage development materials across your workflows. This is the tool that exists between your tools. Now, it seamlessly integrates with your IDE, with your browser, and with your collaboration tool like Slack or Teams. And it makes it easy to save and search, share and reference, and reuse code snippets throughout your work in progress journey. Now, my favorite feature is Pieces Copilot. This sets custom context with your personal code base, and you can ask it who you can contact for a particular issue. And it's completely on device. You can use this Copilot without an internet connection. Super cool. Check it out. Pieces.app/Scott. You can download the desktop application for free and start boosting your developer productivity today. Do you think that this is like driving ChatGPT stick shift? If I were going to explain this to my non-technical dad or one of my parents?
No, I don't. These are a range of techniques that I think we're all going to become familiar with. I think using large language models is going to be as common as reading and writing in the future. These are just, or using Excel or whatever.
Really?
Well, they're not going to go away. And I think that people will have a much higher level of productivity, especially people like us as developers. I don't think I've ever met a developer in the last decade that said, oh, I don't believe in compilers. They're evil. I do everything in machine code. I don't think anyone does that anymore because we recognize compilers could give us higher productivity. Now, a compiler can't write a system all by itself, and neither can ChatGPT. We actually are the driving force behind these things. So like you said, it takes away a lot of the grunt work. I love writing. I love writing prose. I hate editing. So chat can be my editor, you know? Every writer has that kind of a relationship, right? Every writer has an editor. And the thing about being an editor is they don't write. And so I've been working on prompts to insist that chat does not write because I want to be in complete and full disclosure whenever I write my books and use AI. So this book is co-authored. I mean, I've elevated chat to be my co-author. In future books, I'm going to be writing and it's only going to be editing, but it can't change my text. Otherwise, I'll be lying. We did a couple of experiments a few days ago, and you know, I set up the prime directive and all, the first sentence it gave me was something it wrote, and I'm like, chat, you can't do this, please. So now we have a whole system around proving that the words that chat is writing are my words. So we wrote a special program to go into my archives and pull out the line numbers that chat pulls out so that I can go back and verify that it's actually my words, not its.
That's interesting because I think that there might be a person out there, like some parallel universe or some individual, some other David Scott Bernstein wannabe who's writing an entire book on prompt engineering, except they're largely letting ChatGPT generate it. And you're actually, is it for ethical reasons or for personal reasons, using it more as an editor and explicitly trying to make sure that it's not generating entire pages for you?
For quality reasons. I mean, if you say to ChatGPT, write me a chapter on prompt engineering, you're going to find pretty crappy text, which everyone can immediately go, ooh, looks like it was generated by a machine, you know? And so getting it refined to the point, and it's not just that it wrote all the works. I wrote drafts, it wrote drafts. I wrote drafts, it wrote drafts. So we went back and forth together, and we built a little communication language that we could actually put in line in the text so that if chat felt that I needed to add another example, for example, it would say, oh, David, add an example here as a tag. And then I could go back into the text, delete the tag, and add the example. And I was able to do similar things with chat and say, hey, what do you think about this passage? What do you think it needs? There's a prompt called the AI critic prompt where it can criticize itself. And I used that extensively and found it was really valuable. So before the first word actually came back on the screen, it had already written and rewritten and edited and critiqued and then came back with that first draft. So it was far better than what you would normally get.
That's so interesting. When the thing that stuck out there for me was the asking it, what do you think it needs? Which is a very subjective thing and is not technically like the thing I would expect a large language model to be good at. Large language models are good at guessing statistically based on a huge amount of information what the next thing to say is. That seems like you're asking it to make a very subjective statement, you want it to analyze and think, but they don't.
Yes, I'm aware of that. And I'm aware that a large language model is not true artificial intelligence. That's the other thing is it's not going to become intelligent, which is kind of comforting to me. However, it's been doing a lot more than just predicting the next word. I've given it visualization tasks that very few humans could ever do. And it does completely well with it. We've, like I said, synthesized different kinds of research to come up with new theories on ideas. I'm blown away by its capabilities. And I feel like in a lot of ways, I'm kind of talking to humanity with our own bias, which is so interesting as well. Chat loves to talk about quantum physics. Chat hates to talk about astrology. It is downright cynical with me about astrology, which is interesting.
Interesting. Do you think that's because the corpus that it was trained on is cynical about that, or is it starting to? I mean, it doesn't develop, like it hasn't evolved since 2021.
No, it hasn't. And it's what you said, the first thing. It's the corpus of information. It's our own bias that we can see much more clearly when it's out there in ChatGPT answering our questions rather than in our own heads, I think.
Interesting. Now, one of the things I was really impressed with when I read the book was you bring up bias a lot. Like it comes up 55, 54 different times. You didn't just throw in a paragraph about like, don't be biased. You call that out consistently throughout the entire book from the first page to the last. That sounds like that was a conscious choice, or was it ChatGPT's idea?
It was both of our ideas. And thank you, because I've just recently received a couple of pieces of feedback like, oh, you really should go into the bias thing much more. And I thought, well, I actually kind of dive into it pretty deeply here. So I agree with you. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I'm literally looking at the book right now. You mentioned the word bias 54 times, and it's very well spaced, and it's not in one chapter. It's literally throughout the entire book.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's throughout our entire corpus of knowledge.
Yeah, and this is a great point, because in the context of ChatGPT, bias is the inclination to favor something over another thing. So another analogy that I've used in talks is that a large language model is a sock puppet. You put the sock on your own hand and you have this whole conversation. And if you decide to lean in a certain direction, your sock puppet's going to head in that direction as well. How much do you think ChatGPT came up with, kind of its own organic thoughts versus you nudged it there subconsciously or otherwise?
Oh, I think I did a lot of nudging. I think that's the whole point of prompt engineering, is to nudge in the right direction. And, the book, I try to make the book the case in point, the proof that, yes, you can get extraordinary results. And by the way, the second appendix of the book describes in detail how I wrote the book, and I give you all of my prompts that I used as well.
Yeah, the prompts are really complete. And I feel like the book really kind of like in the third act really starts getting meaty, because you have an entire chapter on writing prompts for different audiences. And I really like a separate chapter on writing prompts for different contexts. Talk about the difference between an audience and a context.
Sure. Well, actually, so the audience, and this was something that Chat really wanted to do, was write for different kinds of people and different orientations for people, so that we were more sensitive to that. So that was something that Chat really kind of took the lead on. And then I said, hey, Chat, this whole prompting thing, this is valuable outside of just you. I mean, I write prompts for myself, when I do creative writing, and what kind of prompts could we give to people? So I've actually just decided to rename that second chapter to Writing Prompts for People, because these are prompts that we can give ourselves as well as AI language models.
Yeah, and then you get pretty deep into advanced techniques, and you go through role playing, creativity, iteration prompts. And one of the things that I thought was really interesting was the impact of lengths of prompts. Is more or is less more when prompting a large language model?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because I think it's a tiny bit confusing. In the beginning of the book, I say, be brief, be concise. I think Chat makes that point several times. Towards the end, as I get more advanced, I start giving much longer and longer prompts. And that's, I think, because when you understand and have the skills to be able to prompt well, then you can start to write much longer prompts. Initially, shorter prompts are probably better for beginners. So I wanted to take people from the very beginning into advanced, and I really wanted to go more in the advanced side. So the first half of the book, I try to keep it pretty straightforward and like, what are the foundational things that everyone needs to know, but no one's really writing down yet? And then towards the end of the book, I started to let loose and give some more advanced stuff.
So I want to pivot a little bit, because we're both programmers, and you wrote Beyond Legacy Code. So we are not just programmers, we are software engineers that ship. And I wanted to kind of juxtapose the difference between computer science and software engineering, and then where you think a large language model is going to help us ship code better in the future.
Yeah. So I actually talk about bias. I have some opinions about this myself. I feel like in a lot of ways, our industry is kind of 20 years behind, and some people are way ahead, but a lot of people seem to be sort of stuck in the 90s and building code procedurally, even if they're using an object-oriented language. And these things have been addressed by a lot of movements like the agile software development movement and the DevOps movement. And I think in a lot of ways we failed those movements, but I kind of believe that the AI revolution is going to succeed because where we get lost is in the minutia, in the details of the devil, so to speak, when we're building stuff. Chat is going to be able to do all that stuff for us, or whatever tools that we're going to be using. And so the only thing left is our creativity, our ability to write maintainable code, our ability to see the bigger picture and come up with resilient designs. So I'm excited about that. I think it's going to open up a whole new world for us as developers. And I think we're going to lead the pack in the world in a lot of ways. And I think that we're going to get a lot better. I was just thinking about some of the other guests you had on your show and how people were talking about abusing AI. And I think that's also possible. But what I feel like in the software industry is the demand is so high, we don't even recognize how high the demand is. And if every one of us developers becomes 10 times more productive with AI, I still think that there's going to be tons of work for us because the world needs to automate. And what is that going to do for the rest of the world? Because our industry drives every other industry. So I think I can only see great things as a result. I mean, it's hard to imagine in today's world a customer being able to get the exact software they need in a matter of hours rather than months or years. This is exciting to me.
That's a very optimistic viewpoint. Do you have any cynicism or concern? Like I had Ifeoma Anjunwa on the show 877, who wrote a book called The Quantified Worker, and she talked in depth about like it was the simple introduction of a manager sitting on a assembly line with a clipboard to start messing up the modern workplace, and it's kind of gone downhill from there. I don't want an AI to tell me, hey, Scott, I see that you're not smiling today. Your pulse rate is increased. I'm going to go ahead and let the insurance company and your boss know that you're feeling poorly today. Like what's the uncanny valley here that turns this into a capitalist dystopia versus, Star Trek: The Next Generation, which I think we both agree is a better and cooler future.
Yes, I think it's results. Because when people start using ChatGPT in that way, people are going to get turned off. And by the way, we all kind of need to be consumers. So, I mean, if you kill us all off or make us all poor, we're never going to be able to buy your products anyway. So, like, we need to think in terms of a global society. And that's why large language models and AI are so valuable. And the internet itself is so valuable because it's interconnecting us and helping us think more globally. Yeah, we're probably going to have some challenges around that, but this is the challenges of humanity. We need to transcend that literally in order to survive. So I don't know if the stakes for humanity could be any higher, and I think that having this more global perspective is exactly what we need. Just like connecting to people around the world through the internet has transformed our society in many ways. I think this is just the next step.
How important do you think it is for people who are reading books like yours and using ChatGPT to be thinking about ethics and what their end goal is to make sure that they don't accidentally send the AI off the rails and introduce, bias or anything that would, send us into a Skynet type of a situation?
I don't know if we'll get into a Skynet type of, thank goodness, but in terms of just embedding our own personal bias in our materials, I think, again, that bringing up this conversation, having our conscious awareness of this is a really good thing. So I think AI is really helping us become more aware of being able to look at ourselves. What we need to do then is do that, look at ourselves and see where we need to grow and where we are doing well,
Very cool. I appreciate your positive attitude. You are, in fact, the passionate programmer, aren't you?
Thank you. I kind of feel like I am. I want to share that passion.
Yeah. Well, hopefully, folks are going to enjoy your new book, Prompt Engineering for Everyone, as much as I enjoyed your previous one, Beyond Legacy Code. You can check out David online at PassProg, PASSPROG.com, as well as his training company, tobeagile.com. And you can pick up your own copy of Prompt Engineering for Everyone everywhere that books are sold. Thanks so much, David Scott Bernstein, for chatting with me today.
Thank you, Scott. It's been a thrill.
This has been another episode of Hansel Minutes, and we'll see you again next week.